This video will understand about a very important deliverable of a business analyst or consultant, that is the product backlog creation. It is very important for a business analyst or a product owner or consultant to know how to create the product backlog, the steps, especially into Jira, right? So to write that, they need to understand the requirement very well, and they should be able to understand how the solution should look like. Those deep analysis needs to be done during the sprint zero activities itself, and also during the entire sprint activities. So we will understand about the migration to ISO 2022, product backlog creation for package 08 and package 09. I have just taken some of example as per my experience in one of the banking, and I believe that similar to this, you can also implement in your own banking, depending upon what are the different impacted areas, and depending upon how many user stories you want to deliver those epics for one of the migration, for example. So let's get started. So I've taken some picture while creating the project into the Jira or Atlassian. So when you open this web, you just create your credential, and if you're already working into a project, you would have those access where you can create the project either in Kanban, Scrum, right? So I have selected as Scrum, so I'm going to demonstrate you how to write the user stories in the Scrum itself. So I have selected Scrum, so that is how it would look like. And you can just open this Atlassian 8 over there. You can just create your credentials if you are using the trial version, and then you will get this option. And then it will give you something about this Scrum, some knowledge, and then you need to select the project type. And to select the project type, there is export configuration and simplified configuration. Depending upon how you want to take it up, you can select one. For this one, I have just selected team managed, and there are like essential features and advanced features, and for the time being I've just taken the essential features. For your organization, it will be already defined for you. I have just provided the name of the the next step is, after selecting this one, then you would have to give the name of the project. So in this case, I have given the Swift empty message migration to ISO 2022 as a project name. And then I will have clicked on the create project. So after that, you will get some option to select some of the tools which can be integrated if you want, or else you can just skip it. I'll just skip it, and then you have certain invite your teammates if you are into trial, or even if you are into project. If you want to add some more people into the project, you can add by just mentioning the email IDs, and then you can continue. And then this is how it would look like once you have created a project into the Jira. And you would see at the left hand side, you will see the project name, right? And that's software project. And under planning, you would see roadmap, backlog, board, code, project pages, add sockets, and so on. So at right hand side, you can see under the product backlog, you would see everything is empty because none of the product backlog items have been created. Remember that product backlog items is the combination of epics and user stories. And under epic, you can have a multiple user stories added on and all those. So there would be an option where you can create the sprint if you want to create, or you can simply create an issue as an epic directly. So what is an epic? Epic captures a large body of work, performance related to the work. For example, in a release, it's essentially a large user story that can be broken down into a number of smaller stories. An epic can span more than one project if multiple projects are included in the board where the epic is created. So basically, This epic is a major chunk of a business requirement, which you would write in a business format itself, right? Like as a bank, what it needs to do that you would write rather than as a system, how it should behave, right? So as a bank, what the stakeholders need is what you would be writing. And under that, you can write multiple user stories, which you need to fulfill that epic. I'll show you how for an example in a while. So since I'm going to demonstrate you on how to create a product backlog item, both epic as well as the user story, uh, into this ISO 2022 migration, first of all, you need to understand the impacted areas, right? Without understanding the impacted areas of your bank, because of this migration, what all the impacted areas is, areas are impacted is very much important because the development is needed in all those areas. For example, in MT 103 migration to ISO 2022 PAX 09, sorry, PAX 08, there are a lot of data available in the PAX 08 if you have remember, right? So all of those data were not available earlier in your database or into the different applications, right? So for example, the addresses itself, right? The structure format address available in the PAX 08 has a deep uh, data compared to MT103's address data, right? So now in order to store those, you need to create the necessary development, and also in the user interface where the users populated information for the address, you need to increase those fields and needs to be developed. That is one of the example I'm telling. There might be so many other example, and the same thing, same example for an instance, that address thing where the development is needed in the user interface, the same needs to be um, developed in the database backend and the different applications which it goes through, right? That is also very important. So these are basically a few of the impacted areas for a bank because of this ISO 2022 migration. These are anti-financial crime applications, especially embargo sanction screening as well as AML systems. So related to risk, the sanction screening is important and it needs to go through because all those data which you populate, which the for the outgoing payment it needs to go through some screening and then only it will be released for the payments. So there also those data needs to be passed on. So development needs to be done there field as well. Similarly, into liquidity management, billing, account reporting, nostro reconciliation, top management, transaction banking, treasury, IT, sales, vendor management, operation service, risk management, and legal. These all are the minimum impacted areas because of this ISO 2022 migration, and the necessary development and analysis needs to be done before you start writing the product backlog items. Why? Because you need to ensure that all those applications are also covered and none of them are left behind uh, to make it a successful implementation, right? Okay. Okay, I have just taken an example of MT103 migration to Batch08. It is just, again, I'm telling you, this is just the demonstration how you can write the migration of MT103 to Batch08 Epic and the user story. But in your organization, you might write in a different way. The standard remains the same. Only thing is you need to understand what are the different impacted area and what are the necessary development it needs to go through. It can be a three-tier architecture that involves your user interface and then database, backend, server logic, warehouse, a lot more, right? So those things you need to analyze, and then based on that, some part of some each part, I mean, some all the user stories created for that particular epic, needs to be need to have all those different tasks or issues created for all those teams to be developed. So I'll just demonstrate you one of the example. So this epic is MT103 migration to patch 008, right? So this epic, right, you would be you would need to write as by understanding the requirement from the stakeholders. So uh, during your product backlog refinement calls, even during these sprint zero activities or during the sprint activity, you would be continuous. You would be in continuous touch with your stakeholders from where you would receive the requirement along with your product owner. Or maybe product owner is providing you all those information to write to ensure you are writing the correct product backlog items, right? So you would they would tell you that uh, as a bank, they would need to migrate their outward MT103 payment messages to ISO 2022 package 08 message so that the Swift network successfully acknowledges the receipt. This might be the straightforward exam, I mean, requirement. Now, under this straightforward requirement, there are a lot of things as a system it needs to undergo the development, right? As I was telling you, there are different impacted areas which needs to be covered, and the business analysts need to understand each of it, and then they need to provide the necessary solutions um, for the bank. And while doing so, you need to involve all the necessary developers or testers or their scrum team as well, if in case if it is needed, right? So all those things needs to be ensured, and this analysis would be done during the sprint zero activities itself. So for this is the bank requirement as a stakeholder requirement, right? Now for this, they will also give the acceptance criteria saying that this requirement will be fulfilled, that is done and dusted, right? Only when these two acceptance criteria is met, that the first acceptance criteria might look like this. Given that the outward customer credit transfer is initiated from any channel, when bank receives the request of the payment and bank decides to release the payment via Swift network, then Swift shall receive the package 08 message. So this is the first acceptance criteria, which it says that from the bank, if the outward payment transfer goes via any channel, then bank receives the payment request and the bank decides to send it via Swift network, because the payment initiated from the bank can be sent to any of the network, whether Swift network or the local payment network or some other network like SEPA network and all, right? But it decides to go for the Swift network because of some internal setup, and when it does, then the Swift shall receive the package or made 8 message is what the first acceptance criteria. And the second acceptance criteria is uh, the, the bank gateway system received the successful act for the package rate received from the Swift. So for the payment message sent, the second is acceptance criteria is from Swift, it should receive the successful act message, that is acknowledgement message. So this is the epic, that is the business requirement. Now for this, you would start writing the user stories. Now for this one epic, you can have multiple user stories to be fulfilled as per the impacted region areas, right? And and it totally depends upon how many user stories or how many smaller user stories you want to ensure that generally you would not write the user stories for more than 8 user story points. You would always try to have somewhere between 5 and 8 and not more than that. So first user story, if I would have to write, so since they have provided the acceptance criteria that outward customer credit transfer is from any channel. Now any channel involves all those which are available into the banking, right? So in this case, I have taken one first user story I have taken for the straight through banking. This is one of the channel which the banks uses, right? So I would write a user story for this and it would look like this. So the summary would look like this: outward customer credit transfer with package rate act from Swift from S2B channel. Straight through banking is the channel, one of the channel for the banks. So I would write a user story as an operation user. I want to send the package 08 message to Swift, or as a system, you can simply write. I want to send package or 8 message to Swift network for the payment received via S2B channel so that the payment gateway receives successful acknowledgement. And for this acceptance criteria, I would write like this: given that the outward customer credit transfer is initiated from the S2B channel, when system receives the request of the payment and system releases the payment message via Swift network, then our gateway system of the bank receives successful act for package rate received from Swift. So this is the first acceptance criteria. It totally depends how many acceptance criteria it is required for your bank, right? So this is one straightforward scenario I had taken. And just to show you in the web itself. So this is my first epic I have written for MT103 migration to patch 08 under the backlog, you can see. And if I click on this, I have written 2 user stories under that. So I'll just open the first user story here. So let me open the first user story here. Or perhaps I would show it to you the epic itself. So this is the epic. So this is my first epic. That means this is the actual business requirement, right? So business has said that as a bank, we need to migrate outward MT103 payment message to ISO 222 patch 08 message so that Swift network successfully acknowledges the receipt. And for that, the business has also given the 2 acceptance criteria. If it meets, then this particular requirement is fulfilled. Now, while analyzing this, well, when as a business analyst or consultant, you need to provide the solutions by understanding the system, right? And while understanding the system, you need to understand all the tier architecture, whether it is 2nd tier or 3rd tier. Imagining if it is a 3-tier architecture where it has user interface, database, backend, APIs, and so on, right? You need to consider all of those needs to be necessarily synced and developed. And for that, you would start writing the user stories. Now, to meet this epic, I have written 2 user stories. One is for straight through banking channel, and another is for straight through system channel. There can be a multiple channel like net banking or RC or multiple things, right? But I've just written to demonstrate it. So while writing this epic, right, you would also draw some mock-up diagrams or the flow diagrams or other information while speaking to your product owner stakeholders while writing this requirement. And this would be anyway, gone through by your stakeholder or product owner, and they would approve it. Okay, this is good to go for the development. Once they approve it, then you would start writing the user stories, which would actually help the developer and tester to understand how the system should behave, right? So in Epics, you would show the flow diagrams that such that this is how this payment flow goes, and the necessary changes need to go through the respective applications. So in this example, what I have taken is there is a message queue, right? There is a database and other information which are impacted. And I would write it for each of the user story for the respective channel, for example. So the first user story is this one. I'll just show it to you. So first user story under that epic looks like this. See, epic one, and this is user story. So I have written for as a operation user or as a system, I want to send the package user 8 message to Swift network for the payment received for S2B channel so that the payment gateway receives a successful acknowledgement. If acceptance criteria, I have just written one, saying that given that the outward customer credit transfer is initiated from a straight through banking channel, when the system receives the request of the payment and the system releases the payment message via Swift network, then our gateway system of the bank receives successful act for package received from the Swift. So if this acceptance criteria meets after the necessary development, and when the tester tests it and you identify also the same working, then this user story will be completed. But not the epic, because there are multiple user stories under this epic. So this is also would be signed off by your product owner and the stakeholder, that if it meets, then this is also good, right? Now to meet this, right, you need to have necessary tasks created for the developers and testers. So there are different development it needs to undergo, as I was telling you, for PAX08 for the address itself, right? So 50K and 59 details like name, address details, right? In PAX08, a lot of data are available, which is not there in MT103 and needs to be captured in the front end, and then back end necessary development needs to be done, and also into necessary APIs as well. So you would start writing this task for this particular user story, and so different development needs to be done, as I said, right? So first one, I have written the development, add new data mandatory and optional in the message sent to message queue. This is one of the applications which needs to be developed, and the necessary developer will be assigned to that. Similarly, development of tables and columns to store the new additional data in database for PAX08, you would write, and then in there, you would write down all those the data which are available, optional, and as well as mandatory in PAX08, and which was not there for the MT103, the newly added one. That also you need to provide that information. So development of API that maps data as per ISO 222 message format. So necessary API development also needs to be done for the new data which is going to be stored in the database and which needs to be passed on via the FinPlus. So that also needs to be added and developed. And next one is integration of message queue with the database for enhanced MQ data. Now message queue is where the messages come over, and from database it needs to be synced, and then development where they can fetch from the database while posting it to the payment gateway. That also needs to be one of the tasks. Integration of the message queue with the API payment gateway as well. Same way, integration of API of bank payment gateway with the Swift network payment gateway. So these are the few of the task which needs to be there. Then only this successfully one user story will be completed. Now each of these tasks, you would be writing based on your discussion with the developers and the other members available in the Scrum team, and from there you will gradually know what are the things needs to be done in order to complete this. So this you would be creating it, right? The user stories. What is your end objective and what is the definition of done for this particular user story? And while walking through this user story to your developer, they will keep on helping you to understand what are different tasks it needs to be available, what are different tasks needs to be developed, and what are different applications it need to go. Now, as I was telling you, there are different impacted areas, right? For example, this sanction screen. There also you would need to have this information of the customer details and the beneficiary details, right? So a lot of data are available in ISO 222 for address and other address thing, right? So that also needs to be passed through this application. So you need to ensure that while creating it, right, for those information specifically, you need to also involve those applications as well. So you need to ensure that their participation is also there during this software development project, and you need to create the necessary task for them as well to develop the necessary in their particular application. And you need to ensure that during the release time, entire integration is working fine, and the testers would help to do that integration testing. So those tasks would be also available in the integration and testing in the same user story, where the testers will test this, and then it will give it to you for BU review, and you will review it. So in the roadmap, what you would see, the epics and the user stories, right? And backlog, you will see all those epics and the user stories which you have created. And in board, you will see what are the items are in progress and what are done and what are to do. So you can just fetch it from the backlog, and then you can put it and all. So I have just taken in sprint one, I have just added 2 user stories to be done. and I have prioritized it. That is for the outward customer credit transfer from the straight through banking channel. Another one is straight through system. And then normal sprint planning, during the sprint planning, you would have already done this. And then this you would have received this information from your product owner, what are the priority which needs to be done based on the release dates. All those would be pre-planned, and the necessary things would do, and then the development starts. So this is one of the epic, and similarly the other one can be done for the MT202 also. So for the other one, maybe in the next sprint, in the sprint 2, you would do it for MT202 migration to patch 09. Same way you would write the epic, that is, as a bank we need to migrate outward MT202 here, right? So here it should be MT202 payment message to ISO 2022 PAX 009. Yep. Message so that the Swift network successfully validates, acknowledges the receipt. The same way it is done for both the channels, straight through system, and acceptance criteria remains same. One is it should be successfully able to send this ISO 2022 PAX 09 message to Swift, and another one is to successfully receive the ACK from the for the PAX 09 sent from the bank payment gateway system. And similarly, you would write the user stories and all those necessary tasks associated to it, just like the way I had demonstrated for the PAX 08. And depending upon your bank's requirement, right, you can break it up into multiple user stories for one epic. And once the entire user stories are done, then you can mark epic 1 as closed, and you would anyway demonstrate it during the sprint review and demonstration, right? That time you would do it. Not necessarily that epic 1 needs to be completed in sprint 1 itself. It can be a continuation to sprint 2 and 3 if it is very long, but it is all based on how based on the priority, how soon it needs to be delivered, right? Based on that, you would do it. So this you would do it along with the product owner, since you would be working closely with your product owner, and the necessary stakeholder will provide you on the different releases and the necessary items which needs to go live as per the requirement. So these are the necessary important aspect of the product backlog creation. You would create some flow diagrams like this for the PAX 08, which is sent from the necessary channel, and then it passes through the payment processing application, and from the payment gateway, message passed PAX 08 via Swift and PAX 08, and necessary acknowledgement message also would be sent out. So this is how you would create a new sprint. You see here, create sprint is available here, and the backlog item, if you go backlog, if you want to create for the sprint 2, you just click sprint 3 is just create a sprint, and sprint 3 would be created. Under that, you can create the issue, what needs to be done, right? You can do it, or you can directly go create a new epic. For example, epic 3 MT202 cover migration to PAX 009 cover. So this you can write as a first epic. Right. So under that, if you create here, so view all details. So under that, if you create here, click here, then under that, right, you can write a description on this, where you can write as a bank what needs to be there, right? For example, let me go here, I'll just copy paste, for example. So as a bank, we need to migrate outward MT202 cover payment message to ISO 2022 PAX 009 cover message so that the Swift network successfully acknowledges the receipt. Now, as for the business, the acceptance criteria would look like this. Swift serve receive package 9 cover message and acknowledgement for the package 9 cover. So this is not a customer credit transfer. So this is FI to FI. Financial institution to financial institution fund transfer from any channel. So these are the two acceptance criteria. One which says like if FI to FI fund transfer payment is sent from any channel, and when bank receives and when bank decides to send via Swift network, then the Swift shall receive the package 9 cover is the first acceptance criteria. And the second acceptance criteria is when the outward FI to FI fund transfer is initiated from any channel, bank receives the request and decides to send via Swift network, and then our bank gateway should receive system receives the successful act for the package 9 cover received from the Swift. You can save it. You can add some mock-up diagrams, flow diagrams, whatever information required. And for this, you would start writing the user stories. So for that, you would just write add child issues, and you can just mention as a story. You mention the story only, and to write a story, you would write in a similar manner. So I'll just go here. I'll just use this user story as a format. Yeah. So this one I would use as a format, and this I'll just mention this. Okay, for the story, I'll just copy paste like similar to this. Outward FI to FI for transfer with cover act from Swift is to be done. This is just the summary, and this you will create it, and under that, if you just create it, then you would have to describe it. You describe like this. You would have to write in the certain format. So as a system, I would say that our system, how to send the package 9 cover message to Swift network for the payment received via S2B channel so that a payment gateway receives successful act, and so on, right? And for that, you would, for this user stories, you would further link the, not link the issue, add further trial issue or task under this, right? And while creating the task, if you see, it would look like this, like we did it for our customer credit transfer payment here. And epic one, we have two user stories. If you click the first one, you have the multiple tasks created for it. It needs a lot of development into different applications. Those are development you have mentioned, and for that, right, for each of the development you have to assign to the respective person, so that you can assign it. So it is not assigned yet, you can just go there and you can search for the development for that person. It would be already added into this project by your product owner or the business analyst itself, so that for the respective development, the necessary developer are assigned to it. So this is how you would write it, and this is how the entire product backlog creation would be managed. And all those items, epics, would be available here, and the user stories would be also available here, right, in the backlog items. And from here, you will just simply drag and drop like this, right, and it would come over here, and based on priority, every time it will be developed. At least 1 or 2 sprint would be already planned, right? It would be available. as per the priority so that the developer and testers get enough time for them as well. Hope this would be a very important and beneficial video for you. And yeah, thank you.